Have you walked into your local shopping center lately? Really looked at it? There is a haunting silence that is slowly taking over the places that used to be the loudest, most vibrant parts of our weekends. I am talking about the parking lots that used to be battlegrounds for a spot on Saturday mornings, now sitting vast, grey, and half-empty. I'm talking about the storefronts that defined your childhood, the smells, the lights, the routine, suddenly going dark overnight, leaving nothing but a lease-available sign in the window. It feels like a glitch in the Matrix, doesn't it? But what if I told you this isn't just a temporary dip? What if I told you that in 2025, we are witnessing the extinction event of American retail history? We are not just losing stores, we are losing the anchors of our daily lives. The companies you trusted, the brands sitting in your pantry, the logos stitched onto your clothes, they are bleeding out. They are drowning in a toxic cocktail of skyrocketing operating costs, insurmountable debt, and a consumer base, that's you and me, that simply cannot afford to be loyal anymore. Today, we are not just reading the news. We are going to perform an autopsy on 10 massive American icons that are currently on life support. We are going to dig deeper than the headlines to understand why this is happening, who is really to blame, and most importantly, how this economic earthquake is going to shake your own neighborhood. By the time we get to the number one spot, you will understand why nostalgia is a dangerous trap, and why the landscape of America is changing forever. Before we unveil the first victim, you need to understand the weapon that is killing them. It's not just the internet. That's too simple. The reality is much more brutal. These companies are victims of the 2025 debt wall. Years ago, when interest rates were near zero, these corporations borrowed billions to expand, to buy out competitors, to build empires. It was free money. But now, that bill has come due. Refinancing that debt in 2025 costs double, sometimes triple what it used to. Combine that with a labor market that demands higher wages, utility bills that have jumped double digits, and a supply chain that is still fractured. These companies aren't just losing customers, they are being crushed by their own weight. They are zombies, companies that are technically alive, generating cash, but every single cent goes to paying interest on debt, leaving nothing for innovation, nothing for store improvements, and nothing for you. Let's look at the first casualty of this new reality. Number 10, iRobot, the death of innovation. Remember 2002? The year the future arrived in your living room. The Roomba. It wasn't just a vacuum, it was a status symbol. It was proof that we were living in the Jetsons era. iRobot didn't just have a product, they had a monopoly on our imagination. So how did a company that literally invented the category find itself staring down the barrel of bankruptcy in 2025? The numbers are terrifying. Revenue has plummeted nearly 40% year over year. Losses are bleeding over $280 million in, but the scariest number is this: less than $25 million in cash on hand. For a global hardware manufacturer, that is not a safety net. That is pocket change. It's barely enough to keep the lights on. So what killed the Roomba? It wasn't just bad luck. It was a strategic paralysis. iRobot spent years waiting for a savior. They pinned their entire survival on a $1.4 billion acquisition by Amazon. They thought Amazon would swoop in, pay off their debts, and integrate them into the smart home ecosystem. But when regulators blocked that deal, iRobot was left standing alone at the altar, broke and exposed. While iRobot was frozen, waiting for a deal that never happened, the market didn't wait. Hungry competitors like Roborock and Ecovacs flooded the market. They didn't just copy the Roomba, they made it better, faster, and crucially, 30% to 50% cheaper. Today you can buy a robot vacuum that mops, empties itself, and maps your home for half the price of a premium Roomba. This is the tragedy of iRobot. It is a lesson that being first doesn't mean you get to be forever. When inflation hit your wallet, did you stick with the $900 brand name? Or did you look for the $400 alternative that had better reviews? Loyalty died the moment the price gap became too wide to ignore. Now, without a buyer and without cash, iRobot is facing a future where it might just be swept away by the very revolution it started. Number 9. Fat brands. The gluttony of expansion. If iRobot died from paralysis, Fat Brands is dying from gluttony. You know their names: Fatburger, Johnny Rockets, Twin Peaks, Round Table Pizza. These are the places you go for comfort food, for a slice of Americana. But behind the neon signs and the burgers is a corporate balance sheet that is horrifyingly unhealthy. Fat Brands grew using a strategy that works brilliantly, until it doesn't. They bought everything. They aggressively acquired chains, one after another, building a massive portfolio. But they didn't buy them with cash, they bought them with debt. By 2025, that debt pile has grown to a staggering $1.3 billion. To put that in perspective, their interest payments alone, just the cost of having the debt, are over $100 million a year. Imagine earning a paycheck and handing almost all of it directly to the bank just to cover the interest on your credit cards, leaving you nothing to buy groceries. That is Fat Brands right now, and the timing couldn't be worse. The cost of beef is up. The cost of cooking oil is up. The cost of labor is up 14%. Franchise owners are the ones suffering on the front lines. They are being squeezed between corporate royalty fees and skyrocketing food costs. Have you noticed the service getting slower at Johnny Rockets? Have you noticed the portions getting slightly smaller, or the prices ticking up? That isn't an accident. That is the sound of a business gasping for air. Analysts have downgraded them to highly distressed, which is Wall Street speak for prepare for the end. Unless they sell off their crown jewels, maybe selling Twin Peaks or Fatburger to a competitor, this house of cards is likely to collapse under its own weight. Number 8. Forever. 21. The fast fashion dinosaur. Let's move to the mall. Specifically, the store that defined teenage fashion for 2 decades. Forever 21. If you grew up in the 2000s, this was Mecca. It was chaos, it was loud music, it was cheap clothes packed so tightly you could barely move. But today, the chaos is gone, replaced by a depressing emptiness. In 2025, the operators of Forever 21 in the US filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Again. This is the second time in 6 years. Why? Because the world moved on, and Forever 21 stayed still. They are fighting a war they cannot win against the new gods of retail: Shein and Temu. Think about it. Forever 21 built its empire on being cheap and fast. They could get a trend from the runway to the rack in a few weeks. But Shein? Shein uses AI and real-time data to get a trend from a TikTok video to your doorstep in days. And they do it for 40% to 70% cheaper than Forever 21. Why would a Gen Z shopper drive to a dying mall, walk through a disorganized store, and pay $25 for a top when they can open an app, scroll through infinite options, and get it for $9? Forever 21 lost its superpower. They are no longer the cheapest, and they are certainly not the fastest. The result? Sales have collapsed from $4 billion to under $2 billion. They are planning to shut down over 350 stores. That is 350 massive empty spaces in malls across America that will likely never be filled again. Walking past a Forever 21 today feels like walking past a relic. You see the vast clearance sections, the bored staff, the closed-off second floors to save electricity. It is the physical manifestation of a business model that has officially aged out of relevance. The yellow bag is no longer a status symbol. It's a souvenir from a bygone era. Number 7. At home, the warehouse trap. If you bought a house in the last decade, you probably spent a Saturday afternoon at home. It wasn't just a store. It was a sprawling, endless warehouse of possibilities. It was the Home Depot of decor, where 20-foot-high shelves were stacked with thousands of rugs, mirrors, and lamps. The business model was simple, offering massive variety at low prices in a massive space. But in 2025, that massive space has become a massive liability. In mid-2025, At Home filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The headlines mentioned nearly $2 billion in debt, but the real story is about the physics of retail in an inflationary economy. Think about the overhead of operating a store the size of a football field. You have to light it, you have to heat it, and you have to cool it. Since 2021, utility costs for commercial spaces have risen by nearly 20%. That is a fixed cost that eats away at margins before a single cushion is sold. But the bigger problem is psychological. At home sells things you want, not things you need. In economics, we call these discretionary purchases. When Americans are struggling to pay for eggs and gas, a new decorative vase or a seasonal wreath becomes what analysts call delayable. And delayable is the kiss of death for a retailer. Inventory turnover, the speed at which products leave the shelves, has slowed to a crawl. The debt that at home took on during a leveraged buyout right before the pandemic has turned toxic. They are now closing stores and scrambling to survive, proving that in 2025, having the biggest store doesn't mean you win. It just means you have the biggest bills to pay. Number 6. Value City and American Signature Furniture, the housing market casualty. From decor, we move to the furniture itself. For millions of families in the Midwest and East Coast, Value City and American Signature Furniture were the go-to spots for affordable reliability. They weren't luxury, but they were the places where you bought your first sectional, your dining room table, the recliner for your dad. They were built on the back of the American middle class. But the collapse of these brands in 2025 is nothing short of catastrophic. The numbers are almost hard to believe. Revenue plummeted from roughly $1.1 billion in 2023 to a shocking $83 million within just 2 years. That isn't a decline. That is an evaporation of a business. Why did this happen? Because the furniture industry is tethered directly to the housing market. When people buy new homes, they buy new furniture. But with mortgage rates freezing the housing market in 2024 and 2025, nobody is moving. And if nobody is moving, nobody needs a new sofa. Compounding this is the supply chain nightmare. Furniture is heavy and bulky. Freight costs have spiked 25%. The cost of foam and wood remains high. Warehousing these massive items has become more expensive as industrial rent prices hit record highs. So, you have a perfect storm. Costs are up, demand has vanished, and the customer base, the working-class family, is tapped out. By late 2025, the company entered Chapter 11 with over $350 million in liabilities. Walking into a Value City today is a ghostly experience. The showrooms are sparse, the staff is skeletal, and the everything must go signs are a grim reminder that when the housing market sneezes, the furniture industry catches a fatal cold. Number 5. Big Lots. The identity crisis. For decades, Big Lots occupied a unique space in the American retail psyche. It was the treasure hunt. You went in with $50 and came out with a cart full of groceries, patio furniture, and maybe a discounted electronic gadget. It was the king of the closeout deal. But in 2025, the king has lost its crown. The numbers paint a picture of total system failure. Big Lots closed over 500 stores in 2024 alone, a mass retreat from the physical landscape. They have now entered Chapter 11, with filings suggesting nearly 1,400 locations are at risk of liquidation. What went wrong? Big Lots is suffering from an identity crisis in the worst possible economic environment. They are not quite a dollar store, so they can't compete on extreme low prices like Dollar General. They are not quite a department store like Target, so they lack the premium feel. They are stuck in the confused middle. Inflation destroyed their core value proposition. The treasure hunt model relies on people having a little extra money to spend on random finds. Today, the Big Lots shopper is budget constrained. They are only buying essentials, food and cleaning supplies, which have razor-thin profit margins. The high-margin items like furniture and seasonal decor are gathering dust. Add to that a spike in shrink, retail theft, and soaring insurance premiums in high-risk areas, and the business model collapses. In many small towns across America, Big Lots was the anchor tenant. Its closure turns bustling shopping plazas into ghost towns, creating an economic vacuum that hurts local communities deeply. Number 4. Tupperware, the death of a social network. If you open your kitchen cabinet right now, there is a high probability you will see this brand. Tupperware. For 70 years, it was more than plastic. It was a cultural phenomenon. It invented the idea of social commerce before the internet even existed. Tupperware parties were the original social network for American housewives. But in late 2024 and throughout 2025, this icon faced its reckoning. Tupperware filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy with over $812 million in debt. Revenue has been sliced in half compared to a decade ago. The tragedy of Tupperware is a failure to adapt to the modern consumer. Tupperware stuck to its direct sales party model for too long, while the world moved to Amazon. Why would a busy mom in 2025 wait to be invited to a party to buy a $15 bowl when she can order a set of glass containers on her phone for half the price and get them delivered tomorrow? Furthermore, the consumer mindset shifted. We moved away from plastic toward glass and silicone, materials perceived as healthier and more eco-friendly. Tupperware tried to pivot to retail shelves like Target, but it was too little, too late. They were now just another plastic tub on a shelf next to cheaper competitors like Rubbermaid and store brands. The brand equity, the nostalgia, the lifetime guarantee, wasn't enough to justify the premium price tag. Tupperware is a painful lesson that heritage does not guarantee survival. If you stop solving the customer's problem in the way they want it solved, you become a relic. And today, Tupperware is fighting to avoid becoming just a museum piece of American history. Number 3. Rite Aid, the opioid hangover and the locked shelf era. If you walk into a Rite Aid today, the experience is almost dystopian. You need toothpaste? It's behind plexiglass. You need deodorant? You have to press a button and wait 10 minutes for an overworked employee to unlock a cabinet. This isn't just loss prevention. It is the physical manifestation of a business in panic mode. By 2025, Rite Aid, a cornerstone of American healthcare, entered Chapter 11 bankruptcy for the second time in less than 2 years. The headlines will tell you it's about inflation or retail theft, and while those are true, they are only symptoms. The disease killing Rite Aid is much darker. It is the legal and financial hangover from the opioid crisis. Rite Aid is drowning in liabilities. The company is facing over 1,000 federal and state lawsuits, alleging that they knowingly oversupplied painkillers that fueled an addiction epidemic. Court documents suggest a potential exposure of over $3 billion in litigation costs alone. This legal cloud made it impossible for them to compete or innovate, while rivals like CVS and Walgreens were pivoting to become primary care providers. Compounding this is the operational nightmare. In urban centers, organized retail crime pushed shrink rates, the industry term for lost inventory, to unsustainable levels. But the solution, locking everything up, destroyed the customer experience. Why would you wait 15 minutes to buy soap at Rite Aid when Amazon can deliver it to your door by the afternoon? The tragedy here is the creation of pharmacy deserts. As Rite Aid aggressively closes hundreds of stores to save cash, rural communities and low-income neighborhoods are losing their only access to medication. For many elderly Americans, the collapse of Rite Aid isn't just an inconvenience. It is a direct threat to their health. The neighborhood pharmacy isn't just a store, it's a lifeline, and that lifeline is being cut. Number 2. QVC and HSN, Curate Retail Group. The analog giant in a digital world. For 40 years, QVC and HSN weren't just TV channels. They were companions. For millions of older Americans, the hosts weren't salespeople. They were friends who visited their living rooms every day. They built an empire on parasocial relationships long before the internet coined the term. But today, the parent company, Curate Retail Group, is fighting a losing battle against a technological extinction event. By 2025, Curate's debt ballooned to nearly $7 billion, while revenue collapsed below $12 billion. Credit agencies have downgraded them to junk status, citing a high risk of bankruptcy. The root cause, the death of cable TV. QVC's entire business model relied on people casually flipping channels, but in 2025, cord cutting has decimated that audience. The cable bundle is dead, and with it, the captive audience that QVC relied on for impulse buys. But there is a bigger predator in the water, TikTok Shop. TikTok took QVC's business model, live video shopping, and put it on steroids. Why would a consumer watch a 30-minute segment on a gemstone ring on TV when they can watch a 30-second viral video on their phone and buy it with one click? TikTok is faster, cheaper, and its algorithm knows you better than any TV host ever could. Curate is trying to pivot to streaming, but they are burdened by legacy costs, massive warehouses, expensive studio productions, and a return rate that destroys margins. Shipping costs are up 30%, and labor is up 14%. They are an analog giant trying to run a race in a digital world, weighed down by billions in debt. The silence on the airwaves is getting louder, and for the first time, there is a real possibility that the screens might go black. Number 1. JoAnn Fabrics. The private equity curse. We have reached number 1. This is the most heartbreaking collapse on our list because it represents the destruction of a third place, a community hub for creativity. JoAnn Fabrics. For generations, this was where you went to make things. It was where grandmothers taught granddaughters how to quilt, where small business owners bought their supplies, where Halloween costumes were born. In early 2025, JoAnn filed for Chapter 11 for the second time in 12 months. But this time, there was no saving it. By spring, the announcement came that shocked the industry. Plans to close virtually every one of its nearly 800 stores. This is a total liquidation of a legacy, what killed JoAnn. It is a textbook case of the private equity curse. Years ago, JoAnn was taken private in a leveraged buyout, LBO. Private equity firms loaded the company with massive debt to pay for the acquisition, essentially forcing JoAnn to pay for its own purchase. When interest rates spiked, those debt payments became a noose. Then came the COVID whip. During the pandemic, everyone started sewing masks and crafting. Revenue soared to $2.3 billion. JoAnn mistakenly thought this boom would last forever and expanded inventory. When the world opened up, demand crashed, leaving them with warehouses full of unsold fabric and no cash. Add to that the fabric tax. The price of cotton and synthetics skyrocketed due to global supply chain fractures. And finally, the final nail in the coffin, Temu and Shein. You can now buy yarn, needles, and fabric from China for 40% of the price JoAnn charges. The price-sensitive hobbyist simply couldn't justify the JoAnn markup anymore. The closure of JoAnn is a cultural loss. It leaves a void in thousands of towns where there is no other dedicated craft retailer. It is the end of an era where making it yourself was a cherished American value, replaced by the convenience of buying cheap, disposable goods online. When we look back at these 10 companies, from iRobot to JoAnn, we aren't just seeing bad quarterly reports. We are seeing the dismantling of the 20th century American infrastructure. This is the great filter of 2025. The companies that survived on nostalgia, on expensive real estate, and on cheap debt are being wiped out. They are being replaced by algorithms, by direct-to-consumer models, and by a ruthless efficiency that has no room for sentimentality. For you, the consumer, the landscape of your town is about to change drastically. The drive to the pharmacy will be longer. The options for affordable furniture will be fewer. The places where you could walk in and just browse are vanishing. We are moving toward a world that is more convenient, yes, but also more isolated and standardized. The bankruptcy courts are busy, but the real verdict is being delivered by your wallet. Every dollar you spend at Amazon, Shein, or Temu is a vote for this new reality. Every time we choose convenience over community, we accelerate this collapse. Here at the Unveiled Map, we will continue to track these seismic shifts in the global economy. We peel back the layers that the mainstream news ignores to show you where the ground is shifting beneath your feet. These closures are just the first wave. There are banking sectors, commercial real estate giants, and automotive brands flashing the same warning signs right now. If you want to stay ahead of the curve and protect your financial future, you need to see the full picture. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Unveiled Map. Turn on notifications because the next investigation we are releasing exposes an industry that is even bigger and even closer to collapse than retail. You do not want to miss it.